Hello.
Hey, Maria.
Hi. How are you?
How's it going?
Pretty good. Actually, I was, let me do this. I feel like we've been trying this new format with like new learning lab and like all this stuff. And every week there's just like something that happens, right? From like hurricanes to like, and so like I get this message from Rachel in Chicago. She's like, I think I like messed up the invite. She thought it was like a different whatever. She like deleted it and moved it and did all this stuff. So, you know, so anyway, I'm just like, of course, this is like, you know, this is like our new routine. There's going to be something that happens every week. And we're just going to roll with it. So welcome, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. Hi team, as everyone joins, don't forget to please include Y1 or Y2 for the breakout, and if on your display name and you don't know how to do that, you can click on the PowerPoint slide that's a hyperlink directions on how to change your display name so that we know how to break out into groups. Thanks, Mito. Hi, everyone. So what I like least about being the one who presents, who shares the screen, is you only get to see like 5 people. You don't get to see like everyone joining. So I'm constantly like scrolling down to see like who else just joined. Hi, Lydia. Hi, Sarah. Hey, Alex.
Hello. Hello.
So as we wait for more folks to join just for a few more minutes, would love to have folks just share out or start thinking, sorry, there's a time rule share out, but just start thinking about what are the things that you know about the pillars of fellow success, and you can just jot them down on a Post-it or just on your computer or whatever you have handy. And this could be anything from like the names of the pillars or like what they mean, like anything that you know. And we'll have some time to just discuss as a group in a little bit. We'll give a couple more minutes for folks to join just because of the updating the invite and stuff that happened. Oops, sorry. For those of you as you're joining, please make sure to add either Y1 or Y2 in your display name so that I know how to break you out into groups when the time comes. It'll just make that process a bit easier. All right. So it sounds like the dings have slowed down. Welcome to our Friday the 13th edition of Learning Lab. We are happy to see your faces. It has felt like a very long week for many of us, so we'll try to make this as engaging as possible. Thank you for joining us. Today we have 3 objectives. One, which is just our standing objective of connecting and collaborating with each other. And the other 2 are around the pillars of fellow success. And so we wanted to ensure that as we're thinking about the different centralized trainings and the different content that we're sharing with folks, that we are collaborating amongst our national teams so that like in experiencing the different trainings, you all are seeing like an arc and like are able to make some of those connections where I think in the past has felt a bit more siloed. And so this is sort of the first of, I believe there will be a total of 3 trainings or sessions around the pillars of fellow success. So today we're going to start with just some of the basics in terms of understanding how the pillars of fellow success were developed, how they're developed or supported within the curriculum, and then how are they being measured. And so we'll focus on those 3 components to start us off into this intro of the pillars of fellow success. And as you'll see throughout our time today, we're going to give you some bits and pieces to hopefully tease you into attending the next big reveal, the next session, which will be held next week around the pillars of fellow success. So how we'll do that today is we're going to spend our time sharing an intro. We're going to break out into groups and take a deeper look into what the pillars look like in Y1 and then in Y2. And then we'll come back and we'll hear from Suzanne via a video. She was unable to join us today, but has created a quick video for us to start thinking through how we actually measure the pillars and thinking through the development of that pillar of fellow success survey. It's a lot of work. Okay. That slide is there. I'm just going through that slide because that slide is there for anyone that's new and is interested in more about like why this space exists and our purpose. Feel free to take a look at that slide. But for time purposes, I want us to jump in and start our discussion around what do we know about the pillars of fellow success. And I'd love for folks to hear people's voices. You can feel free to like chat it, but also would love to just hear a variety of voices as well.
This is Alex. Pillars of Fellow Success to me, I think about like the way we're trying to ensure that our fellows reach their post-secondary pathways and aspirations is through these like mindsets and skills. And Amy Henning led a ton of brilliant and beautiful research to figure out what those core skills, mindsets, and habits would be to help them have success in their post-secondary pathways. And it's kind of what the whole curriculum is built around and backwards planned towards.
Thanks, Alex. Anyone would like to add to that? Yes, Maytal, the shirts of I can and I will, I believe, are sort of shorter statements that represent the pillars, so that's great. Yeah. Does anybody want to voice over what they were? Oh, someone came off mute.
Oh, sorry, that's me. It's Rohini. I just, when I presented this to teachers, one of the ways I thought about it is just how to make the connection to CRP. And so I thought about it as like, if we're leaning into CRP in our classrooms, we should be supporting the development of these skills and mindsets over time, and helping to make those stronger with fellows so that they can so that those forward their post-secondary aspirations. And so it's not as simple as this, but like if the input is to the classroom is like we're leaning in with that CRP lens, we hope that the impact then is on the pillars of fellow success.
That's right. Thanks, Rainey.
Sorry, are you about to like wrap this little session up, Maria?
No, please.
I think one thing that we just had a really good conversation about in Massachusetts is that while right now they are the anchors of like the Y1 and the Y2 curriculum creation, they're actually about what will ensure our fellows' success in Y3 and beyond. And like that's actually the orientation that we need to be kind of remembering and rooting in when we think about this. Like these things matter not because they're going to make our students like really successful juniors or seniors in high school, but because they're going to make them really successful young adults. And it's easy, I think, at least at our regional level, to think of them as like the things that are that's just about the curriculum that we've created so far and not about their longer term purpose. And that the fact that everything that we're doing now is actually backwards planned to like a longer term goal.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. That is actually a great point, and one that I think as we go through some of the slides, hopefully will come out a bit, because the more we're learning about the implementation component and how to best support them, it is important to keep that in mind, because the pillars of fellow success, and I'll move us, this is like a great transition, maybe if my computer works. The pillars of fellow success, whoa, okay, I didn't realize there was all, I'm just gonna hit all of them, okay. The pillars of fellow success were developed first before we determined like what's gonna help us achieve those outcomes, before we even hired a curriculum team or like started designing the curriculum materials, right? And so they're bigger than just even our program. The pillars of fellow success really are grounded in external research that says like these 9 pillars are the pillars that that really help students build like fulfilling lives. So success in college, but also healthy relationships are tied to a number of things. And so we want to make sure that we're keeping that in mind, because it's almost like bigger than us, but we're uniquely positioned as a post-secondary program or post-secondary success program to have an impact on these pillars, right? And so y'all have probably seen this slide in some variation or form a number of times, but it is really important to sort of go back and share the process, but like how they got developed, because it's important to note that Amy took a lot of time. And for those of you that are newer staff and aren't familiar with who Amy was, she was like the lone curriculum person on the national team for a long time. She was like the first hire of a curriculum person on the national team about 5 or so years ago. And she led this work of sort of like having all these inputs. So we were in a cycle of getting feedback regularly, and then doing small incremental changes every year. And as she was getting deeper into her role, she started to notice some trends, and started to expand the number of inputs that she was getting, right? And so there were alumni interviews that happened. She started working with consultants. She tapped into work that Chicago was doing with Greater Good Studios. Like a bunch of different things were sort of happening at the same time, that led to the creation of the Pillars of Fellow Success. And this happened over a period of about a year, for her to sort of say like, hey, I think from all these inputs, here's the framework that I'm coming with. Here are the 9 pillars, and we have a decision to make. Like we need to figure out how are we going to address this, because the incremental changes isn't gonna like work. And so we decided to take a pause and make this overhaul. And through that process and through her research, determined that the way that we would get there would be culturally relevant pedagogy. And that sort of led to like the hiring of your current curriculum team and the designing of the materials. And so it's important to sort of note that the Pillars of Fellow Success, to Sarah's point, is bigger than just Y1 or Y2, but really is grounded on our ultimate fellow success, which is, this idea of their choosing their pathway and successfully graduating whatever pathway they choose, that they're actually successful in completing that. Any questions on this before we move on? And also the next couple of slides are like different ways of like looking at sort of the same content. So feel free to like jump in. Z, can I tap you to keep an eye on the chat if there are any questions that come up? That'd be
awesome. Yeah. I don't think you want me to be in charge of the chat.
Are you starting trouble in the chat, Z?
It's not me. It's a shout out to new mothers and weddings and all great things, and then some funny jokes.
Well, I'm sorry I can't be part of the jokes, but keep an eye out for questions. So there's a number of things that I think are important for us to like keep in mind as we're starting to explore like what are the pillars and how are they supported throughout the year, the years that we have with our fellows in our program, and then what does this look like post that, right? And so on this slide, I think the most important key takeaway is that there is a whole literature and learning report, which many of you may be familiar with or may have seen at one point in time, but wanted to link it here because there is a ton of research that went into creating the pillars. And when we say creating, like Amy didn't like make these up herself, right? Like it was a ton of research, and she sort of curated what were the things that based on research, both internally and externally, were sort of rising to the top as being mindsets or skills, knowledge that our students, specifically those that are first generation students of colors, would need in order to persist. And so that's where the list of 9 came. And so they start with that backwards lens, right? So these are the pillars that we know will lead to fellow success. What does that mean then for us in Y1 and Y2, Y3? Another way to visualize this is this idea of like, how do we connect then the culturally relevant pedagogy component with the pillars of fellow success, and what does that look like in a program model? So this is a very simplified view of our program. For those of you that live it every day, it is not this like neat. But the idea is that we're creating an environment that is culturally like relevant for our students, where they can sustain and or build their pillars of fellow success, which they will then continue to tap into as they go into their post-secondary pathway, right? So as they're selecting, enrolling, and like are in their post-secondary pathway, they're tapping into those pillars of fellow success. And so knowing that our students come to us with varying levels of our pillars, but all there, and our role is to create that environment. And what I mean by our role is whether we're delivering curriculum or supporting PDs or are the PDs, right? That we're creating that environment in which they're able to sustain or build those pillars of fellow success. Any questions or thoughts? Okay, so here are our 9 pillars of fellow success. There's a lot of them, and it's a lot to keep in mind. And so one of the first things, like once they were developed, and we went through the process of, and by we, I mean like Amy went through the process of like figuring out what they were and worked with regions to define them and list some outcomes. And we hired a team. One of the first things that the senior director at the time was tasked to do was to create like an actual framework that like visually represented all the things that we captured in the last like 3 slides into one graphic that we'd be able to share externally, that folks, you know, would be able to internalize a bit easier. And so from there emerged what I think has now become sort of our visual representation of our program. And so want you to take a couple of minutes to talk through a few of the components that you see here. And I'm doing my best to sort of like call back all the conversations that we had while the development of the visual was coming to fruition, so that I can provide some context on like, why are these things grouped? Why are the pillars grouped this way? What does it all mean? And so in the process of developing this framework, Crystal Menzies was also tasked with a way for us to like figure out how do we talk about the pillars? There's 9, there's a lot. We're also talking about culturally relevant pedagogy. And so she grouped the 9 pillars in a way that would help us bucket them in some sort of way that allowed us to then say, okay, when we're talking about self-regulation, academic approach, or college knowledge, really it's about content and application. And so we want to make sure that we're focusing on content application. And so that became a little bit easier than to sort of list out all the 3 pillars all the time. And so she went through that process to bucket them into what we now are defining as like our 3, and I don't even know if we have like a name for what they are, but the content and application, self-knowledge and relationship skills, mindsets, and disposition. And these 3 sort of buckets were used when you're thinking about like how we're measuring them. We're thinking about these buckets as well as in terms of grouping the different pillars. You'll also note that within each of those, the pillars that are grouped sort of like bounce off of each other. It is really difficult to, for example, and we'll talk about this today a bit, but it's really difficult to sort of say, we're going to hone in on values and purpose without exploring identity or without talking about social belonging. And so that the way they're grouped feels also like a natural way of when we're talking about building one or the other, that they work really well together and closely together. Then culturally relevant pedagogy to us is sort of like the glue to it all. In order for us to build or sustain the pillars within fellows, it is at the center of it all is that we have culturally relevant pedagogy. And you'll note that sort of the 3 little triangles within represent the 3 stool legs, I guess, that we've been using in our organization. But the 3 main tenets of culturally relevant pedagogy. So cultural competence, social political consciousness, and academic achievement.
And just to point out in the chat, Alex did share the Chicago's adaptation of the CRP flow. I'm not just a highlight for you and for others who may have not seen it.
Okay. Is that like a link? Sorry.
Yeah, I linked it. It's really similar to the flowchart you added, but we like added a little branch of, it's not just about achieving their post-secondary pathways and aspirations. Like a hope of CRP rooted curriculum is also students are hopefully equipped to dismantle and recreate systems. So just like added a little like dotted line potential outcome to the thing. So not important, just wanted to share it as a resource.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. We can maybe link it to the, like in the notes. Actually, would you do that, Alex? Would you link it in the note section of this slide so folks can access it later? That would be awesome.
Definitely.
So would love to take like just a few minutes here to stop and have us like do just a quick self-reflection as we're looking and learning about the pillars of fellow success. Would love for you to take a moment of reflection and consider like which pillar or pillars were most instrumental to your success in college. I'm seeing some folks sharing in the chat. Looks like their social belonging, self-regulation's coming up a bit, academic approach, identity. Some hopes that self-regulation would have been a bit stronger, perhaps. So as you all were reflecting, and please continue to add to the chat or chime in voice if you'd like. One of the things that, I would love to hear if someone who shared in the chat perhaps would like to sort of share an example of like where they were able to or how they were able to maintain or build that particular pillar. So what in your high school experience helped you build or flex that muscle to be ready for your post-secondary pathway, or like what in your actual post-secondary institution supported you in building that particular pillar?
I can share. This is Dusty. I put self-regulation and values and purpose, and I think for me, I didn't feel like I had those early on, and so I floundered a lot. And then I'm a product of a community college and then transferring into a four-year college, and so I think for me, like values and purpose, like not really knowing what I wanted to do outside of high school, and then I started in a four-year college, dropped out, and then floundered for a bit, and then went back to community college. And I think, like not having self-regulation and like knowing or a sense of direction, those tied in together. And so not really being passionate about what I was majoring in, or not really seeing how it all fit together in my life. So I think had those been stronger, I would have been more successful, and it wouldn't have taken me as long to graduate. But yeah, so that's where I see those playing in.
Thanks, Dusty. Anybody else willing to share?
I can share. This is Maytal. On seeing this, I'm realizing I did not really have the self-regulation academic approach and college knowledge going in, which caused me to struggle and really lean into self-efficacy and really try to like seek out from those that I trusted, which were my teachers, how to compensate for those other things. And I have to give it a lot of credit for why I was able to eventually find success in college.
Thanks, Maytal. Maybe one more person to share. Anybody else? All right, so one of the things that I was that we have been as we're learning is like continue to learn sort of the intricacies, and that's why I was like, as you all were sharing, hoping to hear from folks like how nuanced some of this is and how it happens at different timelines for folks. How maybe like as Maytal pointed out, like there are some that like pillars that if you're not strong in one, like another pillar can come in and support you, right? All of these are sort of interconnected in some way. And this bigger idea that these pillars are key for fellow success. And one goal is uniquely positioned to impact, have impact upon the pillars for fellows. However, given that there are so many and there's a lot that's going on for each person individually, for each partner, like as you go through the layers, that we're sort of trying to figure out how do we lean into where we're most uniquely positioned to have impact, right? And so even as we're designing curriculum, we are noticing that, you know, there are some pillars that are like really, we have more time dedicated within Y1. There are some that like naturally we dedicate more time to in Y2. And so trying to figure out what does this look like moving forward? How do we hone in on the pillars that really matter most, or that we are really positioned to impact and support fellows throughout our program. And so more to come on that, but wanted to start sharing with you all sort of what we're learning and what we're hearing from different folks as we're developing content and learning from it as we're measuring it as well. Any questions or thoughts before we transition?
Maria, I don't know if this is the time to ask, but I know that there's been some, there have been sessions, debriefing, feedback from Y1 when it comes to the CRP curriculum. Have we gotten feedback from those that did the CRP Y1 year last year on their reactions to the pillars of success?
I don't know that we specifically asked about the pillars of fellow success like explicitly. So I'm not quite sure like your question. I know what we have gotten is feedback on their experience within the program, which underlying are the pillars of fellow success, but not sure that they like explicitly were asked. Lydia, I'm not sure if you want to add anything to that.
Nope, that's correct. We didn't explicitly ask about the pillars, Maytal. We asked yeah, everything Maria just said. We just ask about their experience. Yeah, but it is interesting how a lot of their answers connected to a lot of the pillars. So, yeah. With their, okay.
No, what I was going to add then is like, I think that's where we're trying to just like start connecting some of the dots and seeing like what we're learning from different, both qualitative and quantitative. How do they connect, and what does that mean for our like path forward? Lots of learning. All right, so in our groups, what we're going to do is we're going to spend about 30 minutes. So just dive in together about what this looks like specifically in Y1 and then in Y2. So I'm going to start breaking up the groups and have a few questions. Dusty, where would you like to go? Oh, you're on mute if you're talking. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Can I be with a Y2 group, please?
Yes. Maytal, would you like Y1 or Y2?
Let's do Y1.
Okay. Sarah, do you want to stick with Y2 or Y1? Where do you want to go?
Either way, wherever you want to put me.
No.
That's where I am on Friday afternoon. I literally can't.
All right, I'll have you stay with me. And Zandrayo, do you want to stay with Y1 or Y2?
I'm in Y1. I put in the chat. Oh, you can't see the chat yet. Y1.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. All right. So I'm gonna open rooms. All right. Hi, team.
Hi, Maria.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay. How's everyone doing?
Tired as hell, Maria.
It's been a long week, and I had 2 days off because I was sick. So
You feeling better?
I am feeling better. It was probably like a 36-hour stomach flu thing by like the middle of yesterday. I was like fine, but man, I hadn't had like a stomach virus in a long time, and they're not fun. Like I had aches. I was just like, it was just that's not good.
The worst. Glad you're better.
Thank you. But yeah, I'm definitely ready for the weekend. So, all right, so we're going to talk a little bit about Y2. And let me see. I thought it would be helpful for us to like start by just grounding in what are like the high impact strategies just that work across all pillars, right? So regardless of what pillar we're trying to sustain or build in our fellows. Oh no, why is my thing trying to reboot? These, of course it is trying to reboot. These 4 strategies effectively do that, right? And so when we're thinking about on the design end, but also for those of you that are either supporting PDs or trying to figure out like how do we adjust, or what are the things that we might want to shift out or add more of, or whatever it is. These are the types of strategies that we want to make sure that we're leaning into as much as possible, right? And so reflection, mastery, experiential, and vicarious experiences really do matter, and they show up in different ways and to different extents throughout the curriculum. But thought it was important for us to ground in that. Because what I want us, or how I want us to spend our time together really is just diving into like the first few zones of Y2 together, and really thinking through, okay, these are some of the strategies that we're hoping like show up and really help develop and support our pillars of fellow success. Like, where are they showing up, and what are the things that we're doing to help support that? So maybe this is gonna work. So what I thought we could do is, if you are in your own PowerPoint on this slide, both of these links are to the same document. I just put it in space just in case. But essentially, I'll pull it up here. I thought what we could do is we could review the zone overviews, and if you all like want to go into lessons, you can definitely look at your own lessons from your regions or the National Curriculum and Team Drive. But spend a few minutes sort of individually looking at the zone overviews to learn more about what the zones entail. For some of you all, you're probably like, oh my goodness, I know what these zones are. And so you don't have to look at the documents necessarily. But taking some time to then write examples of like, how are we doing or implementing the strategies that we're trying to implement. And in the middle column here, I've included strategies that are more specific to each of the pillars. So these are specifically how we build or sustain each of the pillars. You'll see that some are like at the same level of those high impact strategies, and some get a little bit more narrow specifically for that particular pillar. But I'd love for us to just highlight a few examples of like where we see this happen within the first two zones of Y2, and then we'll come and talk about like what we found, what are the trends that we're seeing. Are there areas of like, wow, we didn't include not one of this type of strategy, like how can we do that? And just engage in that way. Any questions about that? So let's start with like 10 minutes of individual work, and then we'll come back and check in with each other. Does that sound good to folks?
Sorry, I actually have a question. Are we writing this someplace, Maria?
Oh, yes. So if you look, if you are in your PowerPoint, on that slide that I was last on, there's a link that brings you to this document. And
for some reason, I can't see. Or do you know the slide number? Okay. It's like very small on your screen, so I can't.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Actually, it's not.
I just dropped it in the chat.
Thank you.
23. Slide 23.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, and we can just go in and in the examples, just write examples as we're finding them. And also note, like, not every pillar is going to be covered in every zone, so, you know, don't try to, like, find something for everyone either. All right. Okay, how are folks feeling? Are you ready to come back and just have a bit of a discussion, or do you all want more time?
I'm ready to come back. My internet also completely died during that little moment, so.
Okay.
I'd love to just talk to humans because technology is trash.
Excellent. We can do that. Yeah, so I would love to hear folks' reaction as you went through this exercise. And I know that the zone overviews don't have as much detail as each of the lessons, but yeah, what were your initial thoughts as you started to map out how some of the pillars of fellow success were being built throughout the first two zones of Y2?
It's Val from New York. I like the way I think like one of the huge improvements of the new curriculum in Y2 is how there's like a balance now between like that college knowledge, like practical steps, but also the regrounding and the wake up, rise up, where like now we do talk about identity and purpose and values within that, what could feel really like task oriented part of the school year.
Thanks, Val.
Maria, don't be mad at me, but I don't want to derail. I think what I learned in this exercise is that in almost every single lesson, the pillars can live, and it really depends on how the teacher like actualizes it. You know, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be an asshole, but it's so true. Like I was just, you know, the personal statements and like how you as an educator, you know, actualize that with your students and what, like how you are teaching it, you know? So I found like it very profound that you all are being very thoughtful about providing opportunities where the pillars can live. And it's really about like, not helpful, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But I think, yeah, I mean, just another testament to the work you and Z are doing, but it's like, now let's make it live.
Thanks, Lydia. Now, I think that Z and I had an interesting conversation today too, just around like how do we continue to build those opportunities and make them more like as concrete as we can on paper to support the implementation and what are the limitations on that? So I think that is like just a continuous part of of like our work that we need to be talking about.
I will say, I think the one thing when I was at DTS with the old curriculum, and I think it's still like a really big challenge connected to the pillars, was one of those 4 points around the experiential learning and how to make that. I know PAR is an opportunity to do so, but I think in my experience, it was just really hard to make it real for kids in that way, like whatever the post-secondary fill in the blank is, it was hard to make it real for kids without getting up out of your seats and allowing space to do that. And like putting it in the curriculum is one thing, but then like that's even harder to make live.
Yeah.
So I think that's been a challenge, and I think that was,
I actually just really liked doing this activity, and I wonder if it could be a cool thing to do with our PDs at like a PD, because particularly for our PDs who are looping, and so this will be their second time doing, I guess we're not gonna have anybody doing a second Y2 this year, but like, no, people who are in regions who've been around for a while know that there are some PDs who just like want the one and only pillar to be college knowledge. and I think actually just like having them do an exercise where they are seeing the thoughtfulness and like the purposeful nature in which all of these other pillars have been woven into the curriculum, and that like, I don't know, I would actually kind of like to recreate this, probably not at this first PDC, but like over the course of the year to really have PDs do some sort of inquiry into like the why behind different lessons that are there, and like discover that for themselves, sort of, instead of us just being like, we promise it's all really important, it's all related to pillars, and it's gonna be good, you know.
Yeah, I think that could be really great, Sarah. And I had like a similar experience. Like I try to like go through the activity with you all, and so I have like my notes here because there's like I'm gonna test to see like did we include the pillars that we said we were like, where are we on this? And so having just that moment, I think, could be great. And I think if you're thinking about like when you're thinking about PDCs and having PDs do something like this, it could also be like a great opportunity for us, like to Lydia, to your point of like saying like, you know, like part of the challenge with experiential whatever learning experiences is that like, you know, every school is different or every campus is different. So like maybe like be like, okay, our challenge for this is like for everybody to look at the zone and like incorporate like one experiential learning activity or take one activity within like a lesson that's already there, and how can you make that experiential based on like what's available on your campus or something. I don't know, you know, something like that that can even help them take a little bit of ownership, because I do think like it's like an interesting balance where like not every school has all the things or, you know, is set up in the same way or has access to whatever. And so letting PDs maybe take even some ownership of that could be like really interesting way to incorporate some of the things that we know, you know, we just need support on. You know, we don't have a ton of that in the curriculum. Any other thoughts?
Maria, this isn't really a complete thought, but in the first few slides where you had us think about like our experience with pillars and which pillars really, so that got me thinking like crazy. And then doing this, it was like certain things clicked at certain times. And I'm just wondering like how connected to this is like human development and young people and brain and stuff. And like, we can kind of like, it was so nuanced for me. I'm like, oh my God, like all of these things at random times I needed and were important. But like in a curriculum, I know we're moving to a place of thinking about like which pillar maybe might have more impact and when and in what year. But it's almost like, I mean, we can't just, and we're not just going to guess, but like, is it connected to human development? Have we thought about that? Like what? And I don't know.
Yeah, that's a great question, Lydia. I think in a simplified way, I think we have been thinking about it, and in the way of like pushing for things that are timely and relevant, which is just general like human development, right? Like, and so thinking through like, for example, our approach for like financial aid stuff in our new curriculum is very different than before, where before we'd like from the beginning we're like front loading like all this information for fellows, and then by the time they got to Y2 they were like, wait, what? Like what are those things? Oh yeah, loans, yeah, okay. And so like, you know, like it was for kids, you know, it wasn't that important in 11th grade, whatever, February or whatever it was, right? So I think there's some of that, but I think we could continue to learn about like what that might look like. And there's some element, which I'm hoping we learn more about too, but like I think there's some element too of like the spiraling piece of like, because for some folks it will click that first time, and then for some folks they need to hear it again and then again and then it's going to be when they're juniors in like their post-doc they're going to be like, oh yeah, like this is important, you know. And so we're not going to be able to address all of that, but I think it is an interesting and kind of like the spiraling nature of some of that what we do is because of that. It is this idea of like, we need to come back to it, because for some students they'll get with it right away and be like, these are my values and this is it, and then some they're going to have to come back at the beginning of Y2, and then again in spring to be like, wait, what is my purpose? Like, what is my value? And so, yeah. But I think we need to continue to do that, because I think that it does play a huge part.
And Lydia, I would just add that was, that's a really great point that you brought up, and something as we like start to think about external research that we can bring in to inform, any of the pillars and like how we're approaching the pillars, as well as like working with external researcher or external like academic scholars and consultants. That's definitely a piece that we'll look into and continue to explore.
Yeah. I think we have about 13 seconds before other folks start joining us. So thank you all for participating in that. I thought it was like really helpful to just go through this activity myself. Always finding ways to like continue to improve what we've been doing. So it's really helpful.
Thanks, Maria.
Hey team, welcome back.
Hey, Maria, two things.
Yes.
Number one, you sort of ripped this away super fast. It hurt my heart. Rachel's trying to finish off her plug. No, the more important thing is I was recording in my breakout, I think, and I want to make sure. I'm nervous that I'm not still recording, that you're the I guess it wouldn't matter anymore, would it? Anyways, I'm just trying to not mess up the recording wire.
I don't think so. I think we'll be recording this, but you can stop it on your thing.
But I'm nervous. If I stop on my thing, am I stopping your thing?
Just try it.
Oh. Yeah, do it.